Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show.
Hello, and welcome to How to Be a Better DM. My name is Tanner Weyland, and together we will learn about how to prepare the best adventures and environments possible for our players and ourselves. Today we're going to jump right into announcements so we can get to the meat, to the good part, okay? First, quick couple of announcements. We're having Rob from Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology run a one-shot for some of our listeners this Saturday. That's right, you heard it right. This Saturday, the 19th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll be streaming that one-shot live to our YouTube channel. I'm going to have the link to that channel in the show notes, but it's just How to Be a Better DM. So you can certainly search for us on YouTube as well. If you would like to sign up for one of the future one-shots that we'll be hosting for some listeners, I'm also going to have the link in there. And we honestly love playing with you, seeing you, hearing from you. So honestly, reach out, sign up. We really love playing with you. Other than that, just it's more of a favor that we have to ask you. You know that the whole premise of this podcast is how to be a better DM, and we're really into self-reflection and improvement. And the fact is, we don't only want to improve in our DMing skills, right? Justin and I, we really want to improve as podcast hosts, as people, facilitating this conversation about improving as DMs. And the only way we can do that is with feedback. And so we've been really wanting some of you listeners to fill out. It's a super quick, short survey, but it's on our website, betterdungeonmaster.com/feedback. I'm also going to have that in the show notes. Honestly, if you could take a few minutes, it would help us out a whole lot. It would also help us provide more interesting and helpful content for you, frankly. And so we would really appreciate that. But enough about that. I've begged for that enough. Let's get on to the main topic, and that topic is house rules. Just for the lay person who doesn't know, a house rule is typically a rule that isn't part of the core manual of D&D rules. It's a rule that the players and DM kind of abide by or come up with just for how they want to run their games. Now, you've probably heard of a few of these, like a very popular one, and might surprise you, but a critical fumble, where you roll a natural one when you're attacking someone, and then it kind of like how a critical success, it's like, oh, a really good outcome happens in the attack, you double the roll, whatever you do, right? A critical fumble is the opposite. It's like, oh, you hurt yourself, or you lose your weapon, or you fall prone, or whatever. Some people play with that rule so, just off the cuff, like they don't even think about it. And yet that's actually a house rule. That's not technically in the rules. Obviously, a natural one, that's not going to do anything, but it doesn't necessarily have to hurt the player. But many people play like that. And, many people also have gripes with that rule. Because, if you're a class that is just dishing out a lot of hits, like a monk, for example, it's kind of, tough luck, buddy, because you're throwing out a bunch of punches. That's increasing your likelihood of, yes, a success, but also a critical fumble. So I guess me bringing up that rule in specific is kind of leading to my main question. Do people actually like house rules, and do they serve a purpose? In terms of do they like them, I think it's entirely on the rule itself. And more important than the rule, the amount, how unanimously it was employed. What I mean is that a lot of times, and I've read a lot of stories, I was reading quite a few leading up to this podcast, but there's so many times where a DM just unilaterally is like, hey, I don't like how this has been going, here's a house rule. Or, oh, this one player, and they might not say this out loud, they might just do it in kind of a passive-aggressive response, where they're like, okay, you can do this overpowered skill that we came up with together, but, since I didn't think through the consequences, I'm going to nerf it, I read one story where a player, he had gained the ability to turn into a dragon. I don't know how, he didn't explain, but he gained that ability, and the DM was like, oh, it's more OP than I expected. And so what he did was he was like, okay, you do that, but then you have to roll to see if if the dragon's greed makes you also try and take things from the other players, And that's very much like unilateral, directed kind of like house rule that it's not technically in the rules, and it's directed at a player. And that's when house rules can kind of show negative sides. And to give that DM credit, they were probably trying to make the game more balanced, which having a balanced game is a more fun game. I think we can all agree. But when the rules aren't thought out very well, when it's not discussed outside of the situation, then it can be a rough situation for the players who feel picked on. And so I guess what I would say when it comes to house rules, if you're coming up with them or if you are tempted to employ one, just make sure it fits a few criteria, right? 1, make sure it's agreed upon by all players, or at least the majority. And frankly, I hesitate to say at least the majority, because that opens up the door to ganging up on one player who maybe just, the party doesn't like how that player plays, or, they're a little party pooper, so to speak. That's fine, but that should be something to be communicated, right? Not something to have a rule set against them, because if you're not having fun, talk with them, right? Try and resolve it that way. Be like, hey, this is a concern. Do you have any ideas? Try and work it out with them. Or if it can't be worked out, it might be worth it to just ask them if they want to stop playing, or something, right? The point is, doing a rule is more like it's trying to solve the outward issues of the problem, but it's not getting to the heart of it. So that's the first thing. When coming up with a house rule, make sure it's agreed upon by all parties, not just the DM, not just most of the players, but preferably all of them. Second, make it clear. This is more just, any rule that is not clear can just become kind of a pain. And especially if it's something that is more restricting, right? If it's a kind of house rule that's like almost drinking game-esque, right? It's like, oh, whenever a player says this kind of thing that we all laugh at that he says too often. He has to, take a drink, or he has to run out in snow, or who knows what. Whatever, like if it's something like that, yeah, that's fine. But if it's more like an actual like house rule that you guys are taking seriously, make sure it's clear. So to go through that again, it must be agreed upon, has to be clear, and third, it either has to fit one of two things. It either has to be necessary, or it has to be fun. And I'm just gonna hop into some examples here to kind of show what I mean by either necessary or fun. Because like there is such a thing as adding rules onto something to make it more fun. If you've ever played like a basic card game like Uno, for example, there's so many house rules that are designed, because Uno at its base is a very simple game. You match either the color or the number / symbol. But a lot of people do it where it's like, oh, if you do a draw 2, you add on top of that. And then, and also you can match same number, same color. You can, there's all these different rules that can kind of build on it. And those rules could seem like they're cluttering the game, but they're actually adding some more nuance. They're adding some more fun. And so those kinds of rules, those are great examples of a game that takes something not written in the manual, and it grows from that. And so, in D&D, there's plenty of things that you can do similarly that help you grow on the foundation that it has. But first, before I get to some good ideas and some middle ground, like debated ideas, let's talk about bad ideas, right? Bad ideas or examples of house rules. So I mentioned the DM kind of unilaterally banning something. Like, for example, many DMs who have a hard time dealing with a class, for me, it has been the rogue in the past. Just a specific class that's hard. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, no, I don't think you should choose that one, right? Don't be a ranger, because I don't like dealing with a specific thing like a pet or anything like that, right? Or whatever it is, they could just ban something or erase just because they've had a bad experience. And I think that in many ways, that's retaliating against a specific player. It's restricting, and it's kind of just, it's a crutch for the DM to not learn how to play with that specific issue, right? And so that's a great example of a bad rule. And there are certainly ways that a DM can be more, maybe change certain races, things like that. But once again, agreed upon, and it has to have a clear reason, and it has to be necessary. A lot of times these unilateral like bannings of classes and certain rules and things like that, it's not out of necessity. It's out of, maybe laziness or, just bias from a bad experience. And really don't let a bad experience with a different player stop you from letting another player try and show that, hey, they can inhabit that role without being a pain for the party. Another bad rule, bad house rule, is just being overly nitty-gritty. What does this look like? So, for example, I know that it is a rule that inventory has weight, right? And some, there's some parties that really enjoy the realism of it, especially if you're going on like a journey, right? Because then it's kind of like almost a survival game at that point, where it's like, oh, I've got a ration, I can only carry so much, almost Oregon Trail-esque, right? And that's fun. For a lot of groups, though, that's gonna just get their goat, so to speak. They're just going to hate it. And there's other things too, right? Like there's, tracking meals. Sometimes that's great, frankly, especially if it plays into the specific leg of the journey. But if you're just in town and you're having your players track meals, or track bathroom breaks, or, oiling and waxing their weapons, whatever it is, if you're having them track these nitty-gritty things, and every time that they don't say it, it's like, oh, you got your secret tracker and you're marking down that they didn't do it, and then you spring it on them at a bad moment. And that wasn't talked about beforehand, which in many cases it isn't, or it's talked about, but the DM's like, hey, we're doing this, deal with it, right? If that's what's happening, then once again, that's unilateral. It's not agreed upon, and it's not fun or necessary, right? It's never necessary to do any of those nitty-gritty detail trackings, at least for many of the things that I just mentioned, right? And a score of other things. It's not necessary, and with many groups, it's not fun. And if you want to find out if it's fun, put it up to a vote. So I just really want to emphasize that whatever you're planning on excluding from the game or including in the game, you really need to run it by your players and make sure that they're down for that, right? Because I want to really stress that DMs, you need to give your players credit, that many times if you think it's a fun idea, try and sell it to them. But don't hold back. Like I said, there are many groups out there who enjoy the more survival, realistic qualities of D&D and the fact that you can track all of these things. But if you just assume that they would, then you're opening up the door to a lot of disappointed players and potentially a broken party where, some players just leave, frankly. But anyway, yeah, enough with bad examples. There's so many that you could do. And frankly, I would say that almost any of these quote unquote, good examples of house rules that I'm going to get to, they could be bad examples if the players aren't on board. Okay. But let's go with some middle ground rules. These ones I thought I kind of categorized into, bad examples, middle ground, good ideas, because, just off the cuff, there's a lot of argument for the middle ground ones. For example, I talked about critical fumbles. That's a common one because some people are like, oh, yeah, let's do it. I want, the game to change, at the snap of the fingers, like anytime like I roll a success or a critical fumble. On the other hand, there's, some people who have taken a step beyond that, where if you roll like 2 or 3, usually 3 ones in a row, then that player instantly dies. If that player has rolled 3 ones in a row. On the other hand, it could be like, oh, if that player rolls 3 20s in a row, then they insta-kill that, whoever they're fighting, right? Which obviously that house rule you can expect. It doesn't need to get used that often. And it's most often when I've seen it, it's like on the fly. It's like, oh my goodness, 3 20s in a row. Does that like kill him? And then the DM's like, oh yeah, sure. That's amazing. Let's do it. But like setting in stone the 3 ones in a row kills the player instantly. That's a very fun thing for a certain party. Other parties, that's like, nope. You can do something terrible to them. Maybe even like maim them, put them like under a crazy curse that they need to go on a quest for. But like insta-kill, that's kind of rough. So yeah, once again, talk with your party about that. Another thing is random tables. So there's some DMs who, and I think this is a fun idea personally, because I love randomness to some extent, and how it spices up. When I'm lacking an idea, randomness can kind of fill in an idea. So as a DM and player, I appreciate that. But random tables can kind of get out of control, or they can take some of the fun out of it for certain parties. For example, if it's like, okay, on a natural 20, or for like specific situations, like when you've taken damage over a certain threshold or something, some DMs will roll on table of, injuries, like as in like permanent injuries that would need to be healed with like a more major like spell or ritual or something, right? So, that could be super fun. Like I'm like, oh, that'd be sick, to like have more realistic damage effects, right? But that could ruin it for the player who's like, oh, I do two-handed fighting, 2-weapon fighting, and now I don't have a hand. You know, it's a very interesting story thing, but it sucks from a playing mechanics angle for that player. So something to take, and it doesn't just stop with injuries. You could do random tables for critical successes and fumbles, which in some ways is great, right? You can find a lot of resources online for those kind of tables, or you can even find like critical success and critical fumble like decks that you can draw from. And that's fun, but when it happens to your player, kind of sucks. So, discuss it first. Another thing that I thought was kind of an interesting middle ground rule was 1 free success a session. A lot of DMs will do this, when they're with a new party, who they're not too worried about, someone abusing the system or min-maxing or anything like that, right? What they're worried about is the new party of new players having fun. And so having them like, hey, you get 1 free success a session, and obviously you'd curve it by being like, hey, the success of a level 1 barbarian isn't defeating, the big bad, but it means that you're absolutely going to hit, right? And do some okay damage for your level. Something like that, but it's kind of a fun idea. Another one that I thought was interesting, group initiatives. It's like, hey, if battle is not necessarily your group's jam, or at least they're just very slow to get into it, you can just roll group initiative, right? And by doing that, you just shave off a lot of that time at the start. Now, some really fun, I honestly, I've been talking a lot about like kind of rules and banning and everything like that. Some of the best house rules are frankly just fun, period. They just kind of arise from the situation, and honestly, like a great example of that is there's this kind of laugh rule that some people play with, where if the DM themselves laugh at an idea that the player is like kind of posing, then it's kind of like the rule of fun, or the rule of funny in this case, where it's like, hey, if it sounds funny or fun even to the DM, let's just do it, right? It's kind of like maybe unspoken, but like if you set up that understanding at the start, then you as a DM, it doesn't make you look like a pushover. It looks like, oh, we're making this game as fun as it can be, right? If it's set up as an actual like house rule. Another thing, some DMs, I don't know if I'd call this necessarily a house rule, but maybe just like a tweaking of a certain thing. But I would say using the inspiration or hero point, or or bottle cap, or whatever you want to call that system, the inspiration system, where the player gets to roll an attack with advantage. A lot of DMs will make that more flexible, where it's like, hey, you get to re-roll an attack, or some DMs will actually give out inspiration points more frequently, just so that players feel encouraged to try things more. And I think that those are all great ideas, honestly. Just using the inspiration system more to release the players' creativity. Now, I just want to throw out that some of the best ideas are specific to your group. It could be like, hey, if your party has multiple things that they want to do, instead of just like arguing for a while, your group could have a specific way, kind of game-like way, to deal with conflict, right? It could be an arm wrestle, or it could be, stacking dice on top of each other and seeing who gets it higher or whatever else, right? It could be who knows what, right? Running around the house the fastest. Just something to kind of take the tension out of an argument situation or a disagreement between what should be done. And it just makes it kind of gamifies it. Now, I would do this in certain groups, and it would kill other groups, especially groups that don't know each other as well. It might be considered as like, oh, so if I don't beat them at this thing that they're obviously good at, then I just lose all the time. right? You want to avoid that. You want to avoid someone feeling kind of excluded or picked on with the kind of rule you set up. So I would just say be extremely creative in all cases. So I'm going to wrap it up here. There's so many house rules out there. Frankly, what I would recommend for my search, if you have issues with combat, there are many house rules out there that simplify combat or make it more fun in certain ways, right? Depending on your group. There are many house rules that can, add some depth to certain systems where it's lacking depth, right? And I would search those, because if you have a hard time coming up with some house rules on your own, but you know that your group could use some, just spiffing or shining up the rules so that it's more fun, then just look up some online. Frankly, they have a lot of great ideas, and I think that you'd find something that would be perfect for your group. And so, honestly, to end this, I would just invite you to personalize your game. Don't be afraid of personalizing it, as it can unite your group in a really great way. And then, if the rules that you think of, if they're not working, drop them like a moldy potato and move on with your life, right? Otherwise, I wish you the best. I hope that you make the best and most fun house rules out there. So go out, make some groups, vote on some rules, and let's roll initiative.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. Monsters, with an S, .rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the two of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.